Hello, I'm Stan Bellamore. I've been the manager of the Southward Car Museum for the last 22 years. Each time I walk through this museum, I never cease to be amazed at the collection of cars that Sir Len has put together. Now let me tell you a little about this man and the museum. Sir Len started to collect cars in 1956. The first car was a 1919 Model T Ford. He started work in the motor industry in 1919 as a message boy in a Wellington motor warehouse, and later, with a partner, started a motorcycle repair business. During the early part of World War II, he started manufacturing steel tube for the war effort. And today the company he established continues as the main supplier of steel tube to the New Zealand industry. The museum was started to be built in the mid-70s and opened on the 22nd of December 1979. We have in excess of 350 exhibits made up of cars and motorcycles. From the 1895 Benz to the 1990 Toyota. Other exhibits include 3 aircraft, fire engines and other memorabilia. We also have a 474-seat theatre and the mighty Wurlitzer organ. So sit back and enjoy some of the finest motor vehicles you will see in the world.
Are there any more familiar symbols of motoring quality than the Mercedes star which shines at the prow of this graceful vehicle? At first the cars were named after their builder Gottlieb Daimler, but in 1901, to give them more international appeal, he renamed them after the lovely daughter of his agent, Karl Jelinek. The union of Mercedes and Benz didn't come about till 1926. Only 2 540K combination coupés were ever built, and you're looking at one of them. The chassis dates from 1938. The stylish coachwork was added in 1941, and the first owner, very likely a high-ranking Nazi, took delivery in 1942. But take a close look, and you'll see that this is a right-hand drive car, and the speedometer is calibrated in miles per hour. This has given rise to the story that it was intended as a little gift to the Duke of Windsor, the man Hitler, assuming he won the war, hoped perhaps to restore as King of England. All very intriguing. But whatever the truth, this Mercedes-Benz 540K, all 5.4 litres and 2.5 tonnes of it, is a superb motor car, restored to former glory by the enthusiastic team at the Southward Museum, who also refurbished this majestic 1936 Maybach SW38. 40 years earlier, its maker, Karl Maybach, had helped build the Daimler car which won the first great motor race, the Paris-Bordeaux-Paris. In 1901, he oversaw the design of the first Mercedes. Not long afterwards, Maybach set up on his own to build powerful aero engines, chiefly for Zeppelin airships. But after World War I, he turned his talents to motor carriages for the elite, earning an enviable reputation for finish, quietness and comfort. Like all Maybachs, the 6-cylinder 3.8-litre SW38 was supplied as a running chassis to a coach builder, who completed it to a customer's requirement. This one converts from a snug coupe to a stately open tourer, which, as you can see, exudes quality of the highest order. And like the Mercedes, it's right-hand drive. We think it was made for a German ambassador to London. Production of Maybach cars ended in 1941, but over 60 years later the great name appeared once again as a symbol of ultimate motoring luxury. By the late 30s, America was a leader in automotive styling. One look at the clean, uncluttered lines of the museum's 1940 Buick Roadster, and I'm sure you'll get my drift. Under the elegant bonnet, the formula was simplicity itself. But if American engineering lacked the sophistication you'd find in the upmarket Europeans, it was certainly effective. The Buick's 4-litre straight-8 engine propelled the big car at a very comfortable 80 miles an hour. Tall or short, the driver had plenty of room behind the wheel and a good, clear view of the well-appointed dash panel. And he, or she, could comfortably share the big bench seat with 2 companions. But Buick also catered for the mechanically minded. Ingeniously, the bonnet is hinged on both sides to allow access over the shapely mudguards. Buick automobiles of this period were renowned for their beauty of line, and our 1940 coupe is certainly no exception. But 7 years earlier, the American public had found it harder to swallow the styling revolution offered by Chrysler's uncompromising Airflow sedan. Innovations like a one-piece body and chassis and headlights flush with the mudguards were offset by a conventional 8-cylinder side valve engine. Even so, the Airflow continued to be made till 1937. A commercial failure, perhaps, but a real trendsetter. Chrome, and lots of it, was the hallmark of American cars of the 1950s. A trendsetter was this flashy fastback by Buick, with its overhead valve straight-8 engine and 3-speed column change gearbox. You could cruise all day in this beauty at 80 miles an hour. And a flash from those headlamps and all those teeth in your mirror could be pretty daunting. The 1950 Buick was quite flashy inside, too. The sleek derriere of Southward's 1950 Buick 8 Fastback. In 1931, after 10 years making some of the world's most successful sports cars, W.O. Bentley bowed out with a big one. This imposing 8-litre, the sporting saloon body was added later, was one of only 100 chassis completed before his financially shaky company merged with Rolls-Royce. The superbly engineered 6-cylinder overhead camshaft engine developed 220 brake horsepower and gave a maximum speed of over 100 miles an hour and a touring fuel consumption of 10 to 12 miles per gallon. Fully developed, the 8-litre Bentley would have been a winner, but W.O. was a better designer than businessman. The Tatra utility, introduced in 1972, was one of the few New Zealand-designed vehicles to be produced in significant numbers. It was aimed at the farmer or tradesman who couldn't afford a Land Rover. The robust 1.2-litre engine and other mechanicals were supplied by Skoda. And the driver's department had all the basics, and a bit more. At the business end, twin loading doors gave fairly easy access to the Trakra's roomy interior. Next to another unusual car in final assembly in the museum workshop. This is the floor pan of a Moke, a multi-purpose vehicle developed by British Leyland using Austin Mini mechanicals. A few minor adjustments to the running gear. And here we've still a little way to go with the dashboard assembly. But now the no-frills Mini Moke is ready to drive away. But before the bonnet's clipped in place, there's time to take in the car's mini ancestry. The familiar Isigonis-inspired sideways-mounted A-series engine driving the front wheels. A fun formula to be sure, and still enjoyed by the intrepid. But the Moke was not a big commercial success, mainly because its low ground clearance and lack of four-wheel drive limited its off-road capability. Back at the workshop, restoration work's underway on a very different breed of car. You're looking at a classic sports racer of the 1950s. Only 31 Ferrari 750 Monza Spiders were made, and this handsome brute was a factory entry for the 1955 Mille Miglia, or 1,000-mile race. It didn't finish, and the following year it was purchased by British driver Ken Wharton, who brought it to New Zealand. After Wharton's death at Ardmore during the 1957 New Zealand Grand Prix, the car changed hands several times till 10 years later Stan Bellamore of the Southward Trust found it in Southland and acquired it for the museum. At this stage, the Ferrari's 3-litre double overhead cam engine is away being rebuilt. And while the running gear and interior detail still need some attention, the curvaceous aluminium body shell is almost ready for the finishing shop. Soon, another Italian racing thoroughbred will return to the splendour of its prime, and the famous prancing horse will adorn its shapely bonnet. In 1935, after several years of stunning success on the tracks of Britain and Europe, MG officially bowed out of the racing scene with a team of neat little R-type single-seaters like this one. Their 750cc engines, and MG buffs will note that this one has a McEvoy Pomeroy twin-overhead cam unit, were downrated but supercharged versions of the popular P-type sports. A feature not offered in the road car was independent wishbone suspension on all four wheels. British engineer Frank Ford got the idea over dinner one day as he played with the wishbone of a chicken. The R-Type's pretty little behind wasn't always appreciated by rivals. The famous MG Octagon doesn't just appear on the radiator badge. Take another look at the filler cap. Aero screens were a feature of racing and sports cars into the 1950s. Behind it, a none too commodious cockpit. Wheel in the middle, see that octagon again, and everything else on the left. That's the gear shift quadrant. Leaving us time for a quick view of the works before we go out to play. It's not quite Brooklands, and even less like Wigram, but Darrell's away with the fairies. He dressed especially for this, and he's just aching to get a foot to the boards. It would be nice to see the MGR back on the track, wouldn't it? In 1934, the Czech company Tatra caused a big stir in the automotive world with designer Hans Ledwinker's streamlined Model 77A. The Cyclops Eye third headlamp would remain a feature in Tatra cars for over 20 years. Inside, a neat English-style dash and right-hand drive. The Tatra's eccentricities found a small but loyal following in the West, notably in Britain, and especially among larger people. Behind that generous rear seat lurks the massive 3.4-litre air-cooled V8 engine, which gave the big car a maximum speed of 95 miles an hour. Air cooling had been a feature of Tatra cars since the early 20s. An ingenious way of maintaining efficient running in winter was this little hood which covers the carburetor, allowing warm air from the engine to circulate around it. The Tatra's crowning eccentricity was its tail fin to stabilize the car at speed. The louvers below it helped cool the engine and gave the drivers some sort of rear view. It's the way the engine's mounted behind the rear axle that gives the Tatra 77A its curious tail-heavy appearance. And believe me, says Darrell, it is tail-heavy on the road. But for all that, it's a real eye-catcher, isn't it? And in the mid-1930s, about the cleanest, meanest thing on the road. In 1952, after many years producing three-wheeled vans, the British Reliant Company introduced its first private car, the Regal Convertible. Spartan, but quite roomy in front at least, the Regal sold for £350, but more importantly for the economy-minded, it was licensed as a motorcycle. Its 747cc engine was inherited from the famous pre-war Austin 7. And this is another little reminder of the baby Austin. After 1957, aluminium bodywork gave way to fiberglass. The single front wheel would turn you on a 5-cent piece, and at the Regal's cruising speed, about 50 miles an hour, the ride was surprisingly pleasant. While the Reliant Regal offered few creature comforts, it was a lot better than walking, and the firm was still making three-wheelers in the 1980s. Could there be any greater contrast between that humble tricycle and this snarling, smoking monster? The Mercedes-Benz 38250 of 1928 inherited its engine from the Mercedes K, the fastest touring car then available. And what an engine! 6 cylinders of a touch under 1.2 litres each, developing 118 horsepower on the brake. But cut in the supercharger with a smart kick on the throttle and you had another 100 horses and had your eardrums shattered as the beast roared off to a maximum speed of about 150 miles an hour. This classic German sports car was raced for many years in Australia by Lex Davidson, who also built its distinctive fishtailed bodywork. In retirement, the Mercedes-Benz 38 250 can still bend the speedo needle, but perhaps not here. Surely there's no more evocative symbol of the vintage British sports car than the Bentley. This is a short chassis speed model, one of about 1,600 3 litres built between 1921 and 27. In competition, the 3 litres rugged but beautifully engineered 4-cylinder overhead camshaft engine with dual magneto ignition hauled it to success on the racetracks of the world, including the famous Le Mans 24-hour event, which it won in 1924 and 27, pioneering the series of wins by its larger successors. On the road, this 1923 all-weather tourer by Park Ward, once owned by WO's sales manager, would have cruised happily about 75 miles an hour. It can still do that today in reasonable safety. Now it has brakes on the front wheels as well as the rear. A moment or two to take in the functional but classical lines of vintage Bentley sports car, the Southward Museum's 1923 3 litre. This is how it was when it was pushed into the workshop, recognisable only to the observant or the expert as the bones of one of the best performed Italian sports cars of its generation on road or track. It was modified for competition in the 1930s and is thought to have raced at the famous Brooklands circuit in England. Its supercharged 1750cc twin overhead cam engine was developed in the late 1920s by design genius Vittorio Giano. Its legendary reliability and maximum speed of almost 160 km an hour from 85 brake horsepower gave a huge boost to the company's racing fortunes. And this is what it'll look like when the lads have finished with it. The handsome and purposeful Alfa Romeo Grand Sport. What would you give to own one? Rather a lot, I wouldn't wonder. The vintage purist might go cross-eyed at what's been done here to a respectable Tin Lizzie, but they might grudgingly admit that it is an art form. Some years ago, Gavin Norris of Levin took the old bones away, painted or chromed everything in sight, and rattled it all into this splendid hot rod. For the grunt, Gavin replaced Henry Ford's old side valve 4 with a 350 Chev V8, so Bloodshot, as he aptly called it, was as hot as it looks. The holes in the dropped beam axle are more to do with fashion than weight saving. All in all, it's doubtful if old Mr. Ford would see much he'd recognise. With his FM5 Grand Prix car of 1973, Southlander George Begg joined the likes of McLaren, Hulme and Amon in raising New Zealand's profile in international motor racing. With a 302 cubic inch Chevrolet V8 driving a Hewland GD300 transaxle, this machine, the next to last of 19 built by Begg, took David Oxton to victory in the 1973 and 74 Gold Star Championships and third place in the 74 New Zealand Grand Prix. Oxton also raced it successfully in the UK and Europe. The Begg FM5, thought to be the only New Zealand-built single-seater to compete overseas and return home. Back in the museum's workshop, the lads have been getting to grips with one of our more unusual exhibits. This three-wheeler utility was built in 1938 by the Kurogane Motor Company of Japan for delivering goods in narrow streets, but was widely used during World War II as an ammunitions and personnel carrier, especially in the Japanese-occupied Pacific Islands. It came to us in rough but sound condition. And of course the idea was to restore it in its war paint so you can see what it looked like in Imperial Army service. The back end is orthodox enough, with its live axle and sturdy leaf springs supporting a substantial frame. And so is the front. Into the final assembly stage now as Darrell and John fit the 750cc V-twin back into its cradle. And the truck half and the motorcycle half are bolted together. And there we are, one World War II Kurogane three-wheeler. But everything just reeks of Harley-Davidson, even the somewhat optimistic speedometer. The Kurogane was good for 30 miles an hour, with a 1-ton payload. But for this exercise, some rather less demanding territory. Among the two-wheeled classics at Southwards is this Mark II Aerial Square 4. When it appeared in 1956, the Square 4 was one of the more ambitious products of a complacent British industry still resting on its pre-war laurels. As the name suggests, the bike's 1000cc engine had 4 cylinders arranged in a square, a formula the company had first adopted in the ill-timed Mark I of 1930, introduced at the height of the Great Depression. Things were far more buoyant in 1956, and all seemed set fair for this chunky, purposeful and beautifully made machine. It pulled smoothly and powerfully to a genuine 100 miles an hour, and became a great favourite with the sidecar brigade. But alas, there weren't enough of them to make any major impact on sales, and fewer than 4,000 Aerial Square 4s had been made when production ended in 1959. Well made, well furnished, but unexciting and expensive. That was the verdict delivered on the products of the Star Motor Company of Wolverhampton after the company finally folded in 1932. But 20 years earlier, cars like this 16-horsepower tourer had been among Britain's top sellers. And as it revolves in the museum foyer, let's explore the Star's many charms. Its graceful curves and delicate, almost feminine beauty disguise a solid, well-engineered, practical, middle-class family car of what British old car fanciers still refer to as the Edwardian era. Following the dictates of fashion, access to the driver's seat was from the left. You'll see why later. And as in most cars of those times, the instruments, you were lucky if you got a Speedo, were somewhere under there. Dashboards came later. All-weather protection was rare in British cars of this period, but the hood did keep the rain off your hat. It stowed away on these. Fuel was pumped from the tank to the engine by vacuum. But this is why the driver had to be a gymnast to get in. Note the wooden spokes, still favoured by some manufacturers well into the 1920s. Easy access and plenty of legroom for the rear seat passengers. The handbrake was also outside the body. The Star's 15.9 horsepower side-valve engine had 2 cylinder blocks with non-detachable heads. All very conservative, but it continued in production for a few years after World War I. A comfortable touring speed was 40 to 45 miles an hour. The bright and beautiful Star 16 Tourer of 1912. A star turn indeed. A pretty ordinary vintage English tourer, wouldn't you say? But appearances can be deceptive, and with this 1923 8-horsepower Gwin they certainly are. The neat 950cc overhead valve engine developed by Elizalde in Spain gave the little car a lively turn of speed and excellent economy. But behind the engine, a real surprise. As the inscription on the bonnet says, the Gwin was fitted with automatic transmission, and between 1923 and 34 it covered 160,000 kilometres. Trouble-free, we'd like to think. But this early automatic seems to have been a one-off. On the debit side, the Gwin 8 and its stablemates were noisy and uncomfortable. And after 7 difficult years, the London-based company gave up on cars and returned to what it did best, making centrifugal pumps. The 1928 Gwin 8 automatic. This 1921 8-horsepower Morgan and its stablemate, which we'll see shortly, represent the many and varied three-wheelers produced by Britain's last family-owned car maker. In 1910, founder H.F.S. Morgan set the pattern with a V-twin motorcycle engine, in this case a water-cooled JAP, mounted right out front and driving the rear wheel by chain. Another enduring feature was Morgan's own sliding pillar and coil spring independent front suspension. Primitive but effective and retained till quite recent years. Inside, what luxury! Somewhere to put your maps and sandwiches, a speedometer on the far right, and direct one-to-one steering with motorbike-style ignition, throttle and choke controls. Chummy motoring for two at £87 10 shillings. The starter was extra. From the pedestrian 8-horsepower, flat out at 50 downhill, to the best of the bunch, the mid-30s Aero Super Sport. It came with various engines, but this one's a 990cc matchless. If you really wound it up, you might attain a heart-stopping 80 miles an hour. The ride was quite steady, but the cardinal rule was watch it in the wet. Morgan made three-wheelers to take advantage of the British motorcycle licence fee, £4 a year in 1910, but developed them into fun cars and record breakers. In 1930, a modified one reached 124 miles an hour, covered 101 miles in 1 hour, and set 44 official speed records. The last three-wheeler didn't leave the factory at Malvern, Worcestershire, till 1950. Next, a look under the skin of the world's most famous motor car. In 1906, 2 years after Charles Rolls and Henry Royce formed their momentous partnership, they trimmed their range to just one model, the magnificent Silver Ghost. Over some 19 years, a little over 6,000 of these great cars were made. Appearance is altered with fashion or customer requirement, but their mechanicals changed very little. The 7.4-litre side-valve dual-ignition engine is a work of art, and for its period, an engineering masterpiece. The Silver Ghost could haul a heavy limousine or landaulet at a steady 60 miles an hour in almost total silence. Economy wasn't really an issue if you could afford one of these, but in 1911 a Ghost was driven from London to Edinburgh and back in top gear for an average fuel consumption of 24.32 miles per gallon. How the transmission survived the exercise is not reported. So to the chauffeur's department. From 1913, Rolls-Royces settled with a 4-speed gate-change gearbox. Synchromesh was still years away. But in 1922, when this chassis was built, the driver could at least enjoy the luxury of a dash panel. Designed to carry very heavy coachwork, the strong chassis and robust suspension was well tested during World War I, when Silver Ghosts served as armoured cars. The anatomy of the best car in the world, the Rolls-Royce Silver Ghost. This shapely speedboat occupies a special place not only in the museum, but in New Zealand's sporting history. It was on February the 22nd, 1953, on Wellington Harbour, that Sir Len Southward made it the first boat in Australasia to exceed 160 kilometres an hour, or in terms of miles per hour, the magic ton. Its mascot may have been a lady, but Redhead might well have been an apt nickname for young Len himself. Boat and pilot were a formidable combination. Between 1948 and 59, they won just about every important Trans-Tasman trophy, crowning their achievements in 1956 with an Australasian water speed record of 175.84 kilometres an hour.
Being loaded onto a railway truck is New Zealand's crack speedboat, holder of both the Australian and New Zealand records. It's en route to Auckland to defend its title. At Auckland, on the day of the race, vantage points are crowded, and waiting onlookers are entertained by preliminaries between small speedboats. The water is too choppy for comfortable racing, but it adds to the fun for the spectators. The principal contestants in the big race are Barracuda with a 300 horsepower Hispano motor, Supersonic with a 109 horsepower Dodge motor, and Redhead powered by a 1000 horsepower Allison Aero engine. Some of Auckland's famous yachts have even deigned to watch the noisy, smelly things that are polluting their harbour. They're away. With a terrific burst of speed, Redhead immediately takes the lead. And she's still holding it. Water conditions are far from ideal, and the drivers dare not give their engines full throttle. For the crowd, there's plenty of excitement as the boats come splashing, dashing past at close quarters. At the upper mark, Redhead smacks into a heavy chop as she turns, but she still holds her speed. All the drivers are taking big risks today, and spectators are treated to a great display. Keeping up this pace for 10 miles on a triangular course calls for good seamanship. And Redhead wins the race and the Gold Cup. The others never got near her.
Its heart was this 1400 horsepower Allison V12, probably out of an Air Force Kitty Hawk fighter. Redhead's glory days ended suddenly at Picton when she sank after throwing a propeller blade at speed. The shaft was thrown out of balance and pierced the wooden hull. Her battle with her element was over. To the eye of the seasoned motor racing enthusiast, this is a real racing car. Engine in front under that long bonnet, open-sided cockpit so you could see the driver working hard to keep the brute on the track, and shapely, bug-shaped tail. But although the 1950 Maserati 8 CLT looked a typical Grand Prix car of its period, it was actually one of two supercharged 3-litre straight-eights built for that year's Indianapolis 500. In the event, Maserati decided not to use them and sold the pair to New Zealander Fred Zambucca, who raced them here with some success. Their next owner, Frank Shooter of Christchurch, overhauled them and one finished 13th in the 1958 New Zealand Grand Prix. Shooter also established a long-standing New Zealand 3-litre record of 267 kilometres an hour. Maserati brothers would not have been surprised. In tests at Modena, they'd recorded 290 with boost from the supercharger and a claimed top speed of over 320. The Maserati 8 CLT Indianapolis, an Italian thoroughbred with a proud New Zealand history. Here we have Der Grosse, the big one, exclusive transport for the elite in Nazi Germany. Under the sleek bonnet of this Mercedes-Benz 770K Tourer, one of just 88 built, lies a 7.8-litre supercharged straight-eight. This big one, a 3.7-ton four-seater, 3 more if the Herr General needed aides or bodyguards, dates from 1939 and was used mostly for ceremonial parades. But if things got a bit hot, it could show a surprisingly clean pair of heels. The distinctive mascot of the Pierce Arrow, for nearly 30 years the epitome of quality and luxury in American motoring, and a styling trendsetter as well. Built-in headlamps had been a feature since 1913. Their massive 7-passenger saloon with its 7.5-litre V12 engine first appeared in 1932 against a background of drastically falling sales. The car's elegant opulence didn't attract enough customers to reverse the trend, but among those beguiled by its charms was a Mr. Hoshea, a well-known Hawke's Bay identity who worked for the National Tobacco Company in Napier. He paid a princely £2,200 for this one in 1934. The upholstery is in red pigskin, and the paintwork was protected by 10 coats of lacquer. In New Zealand, as in many countries to counter fuel shortages in wartime, kits became available for adapting cars to run on coal gas. On this 1939 Nash, modified by Sir Len Southward, coal from an onboard container was placed in a burner set into the driver's side mudguard. The gas produced was piped under the car, through this filter, and straight into the carburettor. The burners worked well enough, but the firebox needed decoking every 30 miles or so, and you had to have somewhere to stow the fuel. As you read the plaque, you'll realise that this is another rather special exhibit. With the end of World War I in 1918, demand for military aircraft fell away sharply, and British manufacturers were forced to find new ways of staying afloat. Sopwith Aviation, who'd made their mark with fine fighters like the Camel, looked to the roads for their salvation. Their 8-horsepower ABC motorcycle with its special sprung frame and leg protection for the rider caused a sensation at the 1919 London Motorcycle Show. Its horizontally opposed 400cc twin-cylinder engine gave it a claimed top speed of over 80 kilometres an hour. Several came to New Zealand, and as the plaque says, in 1920 this one found its way to Wellington, where Len Southward, a 15-year-old apprentice mechanic, assembled it. Many years later, quite by chance, Sir Len and his ABC were reunited, and he lovingly restored it as you see it now. From wings to wheels, Sopwith Aviation's 8-horsepower ABC motorcycle. Between 1925 and 1936, Captain D.M.K. Marandaz, who learnt his trade with the Alvis Company, set up factory in London to produce a series of attractive, low-slung sports cars he called Specials. Over the years, they earned him a number of trophies for races won and records broken. This particular Marandaz Special, a 1590, was built to compete in the 1936 Ulster TT at Ards, where it lapped at 73 miles an hour, breaking the record for its class. Under the rakish bonnet, the compact 2-litre 6-cylinder Coventry Climax engine with overhead inlet valves and triple carburettors, delivering a snappy 90 brake horsepower. The car's first registered owners were staunch Marandaz supporters Alfred and Aileen Moss, the parents of British motor racing's most famous son. In spite of its fine track record and loyal following, the 1590 was the last of the Marandaz line. The good captain had a ship to catch. The most successful new family car to appear in Britain after World War II was the Morris Minor. Its designer, Alex Isigonis, played with a number of revolutionary ideas for engines, but the car was finally introduced at the 1948 London Motor Show with the side valve unit which had powered 3 generations of Morris 8s. This is the original low-light model. A couple of years later, a change in regulations forced Morris to move the headlamps up to the mudguards, spoiling the car's clean lines. 7 years down the track came BMC's Minor 1000 with its Austin-inspired overhead valve engine. This 1967 saloon, supplied to the then Archbishop of Canterbury, Dr. Michael Ramsey, was dubbed the Holy Roller. Its exploits during the Himalayan rally that year found the front page in Britain's newspapers. This is the Minor Traveller, known for obvious reasons as the Woody. Although quite a few were imported to New Zealand, Woodies were not assembled here. These days a good one is a highly collectible classic. Among the Minor's early competitors were pre-war relics like this sit-up-and-beg Ford Prefect, which soldiered on till 1953, when it and the 2-door Anglia were replaced by new low-line models. This 1958 100E Anglia and its equivalent Prefect were scaled-down replicas of the popular Consul and Zephyr 6 saloons. 2 years later, Ford surprised and delighted its faithful with the lively overhead valve 105E Anglia, with its distinctive tucked-in rear window. 1.3 million were made before the Anglia gave way early in 1968 to the partly German-engineered Escort, which in Grand Touring form would acquit itself with distinction on the international rally circuit. In 1962 came the Cortina, which, in revised and developed forms, would dominate the British medium-sized car market for the best part of 2 decades. The 1500cc 85 bhp GT model with front-wheel disc brakes was introduced in 1964. This Mark I GT was the first of its kind to reach New Zealand. Ford brought it in for Sir Len Southward's Lesco racing team. In standard form, the Cortina GT was good for a touch over 150 km an hour. And the big Fords, like this Australian-assembled 65 Falcon Futura Coupe and Fairlane V8 automatic of 1979, found a ready niche market in New Zealand. In 1952, to honour the heir to the Japanese throne, Tama Motors of Tachikawa changed its name to Prince Motors and began building a new 1.5-litre saloon. 3 years later, as the Prince Skyline, it became the first Japanese car to be promoted in Europe. In 1966, Prince Motors was absorbed by Nissan, but the Skyline survived and the name lives on. This handsome Prince Skyline dates from 1965. An early Japanese challenger to Western automotive supremacy was Mitsubishi, builders of the formidable wartime Zero fighter plane. They'd been making cars since 1917, but made little impact abroad until the mid-1960s. This perky little Colt 1100 was built for short legs and petite posteriors, but set new standards in build quality and reliability. The British Roots Group's dull but reliable Hillman Minx cum Humber 80 family saloons had a loyal following in Australasia from the 1930s to the 60s. This Mark V of 1952 had a 1265cc side valve engine and a claimed maximum speed in the order of 120 km an hour. Soon after acquiring the Singer Company in 1956, Roots launched the Gazelle, a prettied-up Hillman Minx, powered by Singer's own 1496cc overhead cam engine. But in this 1958 model, they'd given way to standard Minx mechanicals. In 1973, New Zealand assembly of Roots Group vehicles was shifted to the new Porirua plant of Todd Motors. This 1725cc Hillman Hunter GL automatic was one of the first off the line. The original Wyvern or Wyvern was a mythological winged monster, but from 1948 to 57 it applied to the roomy and reliable 1.5-litre four-cylinder base model of General Motors' British arm Vauxhall. This one dates from 1954. And as you see, Southwards has found room to show off a few Kiwi creations. This fiberglass-bodied MG-style T-car, the inspiration of Russell Hooper of Auckland, is the prototype of what's become the most successful locally produced car. Sold in kit form, the Marks 1 to 4 were based on the Triumph Herald chassis and mechanicals, but the Mark V, a much more accurate MG TF lookalike, is Mazda or Nissan powered. Our less orthodox New Zealand-made plastic fantastics like the Daytona Beach Buggy and the Taipan Sports are Volkswagen-based. And amongst the heavy metal at Southwards, a 30-horsepower four-cylinder Leyland tanker donated by Shell. A typical British commercial of the early 1920s, it was flat out at 20 miles an hour with a 5-ton payload. The 1925 Buddy Stewart from America was a shade quicker. Fire brigades were established in New Zealand in the mid-19th century. Early equipment like this ex-Wellington Fireboard Shand and Mason tender and our 1900 Merryweather steam pump from England were literally horse-powered. This impressive Dennis fire engine was light years ahead. It cost the Fielding Fire Brigade £1,000 in 1927 and earned its keep handsomely over many years. Regal, humble, sporting or functional. The historic vehicles at the Southward Museum trace the development of motor transport from its earliest days. In this video we've shown you just a small sample and tried to give you an idea of the work involved in restoring and exhibiting them. But it doesn't end here. In our store are many more, large and small, opulent or utility, awaiting their turns to shine again.